Hi everyone, Leanne here from Jaded Blossom, and it is time for our April 2021 hop. And I have two cards to share. Hey everybody. So I am using the new Knit Stitch stencil, Knit Happens, which is also new. And I'm using our fall dies. I'm using the scallop slider and topper die, our fall banner dies, and our fancy pumpkin die. I'm also pulling out some Lawn Fawn. So I'm using Lawn Fawn Knock on Wood 6-inch. I'm using Lawn Fawn Watercolor Wishes 6-inch. And I'm using Perfectly Plaid for Fall in the 12-inch line. So now I'm pulling out my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station. And I've cut out the biggest outline pumpkin out of Orange Zest cardstock from Paper Tray ink. And I used my Gemini machine to cut that out. And now I'm applying Rusty Hinge ink through the new Knit Stitch stencil onto this pumpkin. So I'm just quickly doing that. I've got a little piece of Stampin' Up pad underneath there to rub my brush off. That is a Tailored Expressions blending brush. And there I am. I just added the knitting stitch to the pumpkin front. And I'm going to do the same because I'm making two cards. So I'm going to do the same to both pieces. Like I said, this is Orange Zest cardstock from Paper Tray ink. And I picked that just because it went with the patterns and colors that I was using. So that's what I was going for. There we are. It doesn't have to be a perfect blend, but you know, there we go. I'm just making some pattern paper. So now I've got my Martha Stewart scoreboard, and I'm scoring a piece of Canyon clay cardstock from Paper Tray ink, 4.25 by 11 inches, and scoring it at 5.5 for a vertical A2 sized card. I'm just using my Teflon bone folder there. And just quickly making sure I get a really good score line. And I like it when it's a really tight score because then your card's not flipping open on you when you're working on it. So there we are. So those are my two background pieces. So I cut a piece of the plaid cardstock at 4 1/8 by 5, well, 1/8 less than 5.5, whatever that is. I'm Canadian. So it's just an 1/8 inch smaller than the 4.25 by 5.5 inch card base. And I used my Simon Says Stamp Craft Tacky glue to stick that down, just so I have some wiggle time so I can get it in the center. It's hard to get to center things now, I find. So there we go. So I'm just applying that glue again. And I'm centering that piece of pattern paper. I love these plaids from Lawn Fawn. They're just so pretty. And like I said, that's a Canyon clay card base from Paper Tray ink. So now I'm pulling out my art glitter glue in a little fine tip bottle, and I'm applying it to the outline die that I also cut using my Gemini. And that is from the Fancy Pumpkin dies too. And that is Paper Tray ink's chocolate cardstock. So I like this little bottle because it has a little needle tip, which makes things easier. I've got my EK Success tweezers there, just trying to line this up without getting glue all over the place. There we go. And I'm using all Distress inks instead of Distress Oxide inks today, just because I want them to be their dark, true selves, you know, on my backgrounds and my paper. So that's what I'm doing. So now this is my second piece that I'm lining up. And you'll notice that I kind of messed this one up a little bit. I'll move it around. And, you know, when I'm crafting, nothing ever goes exactly as planned. So there we are, just trying to line that all up. And then that's my second pumpkin. So now I'm just filling in the hole. That is also Paper Tray ink's chocolate cardstock. I'm thinking of using something else, but I changed my mind. I'm going to use the center that cut out from the original die. There we go. And then I went ahead and I cut the leaves and everything. The curlicues and everything are all, and that leaf is all from the same Paper Tray ink chocolate cardstock. I'm just using Stampin' Up! Dimensionals to pop up the leaf and then my glue to stick down my little curlicues. All the other leaves, though, are cut out of that Knock on Wood paper pad. I just used like the kind of like the mustard yellow and the turquoise color to cut out the leaves. So I cut all the leaves out, basically my fall dies and my fall banner dies, all the leaves in both of the card pattern papers to go with these card or fall cards. Sorry guys. I'm tired today. I had a terrible sleep last night. So now here we are. So I cut out that scalloped slider and topper die. That's a Jaded Blossom die. With this yellow piece of paper from that Lawn Fawn Watercolor Wishes pad. And now I'm going to do some freehand stamping using Pine Cone VersaFine Clair ink onto the bottom. And you'll see, at first I want the sentiment on the bottom of this piece. So I go ahead and I stamp it on the bottom. And, you know, Jaded Blossom dies are great, usually for stamping sentiments. You know, rub your fingers over them a few times, stamp them once, and usually you're in business. So I go ahead and I stamp these. I get great images, but then I change my mind as to where I want the sentiment on my card. I pop my pumpkin on there and I'm like, yeah, no, I want it in the upper left-hand corner of that. So, you know, change my mind. You got to go with the flow. So I'm going to stamp it in the upper left-hand corner now. There we are. I quite like that paper, that Watercolor Wishes from Lawn Fawn. It looks like a nice watercolored background. I quite like that. So I just think it looks really nice and, you know, not too much work. So now I'm going to stick down this scallop die that I cut out using my Gemini machine, like always. I'm just going to center that on the plaid base. I'm just gluing it directly down using Simon Says Stamp Craft Tacky Glue. So fast and easy stuff. I'm going to have a little bit of dimension with the pumpkin, so I didn't want to have too much dimension by popping up that scallop slider. Also, if I was going to pop it up, I would cut it out of a more solid cardstock, like a thicker cardstock, and then stick this lighter weight pattern paper on top, just so it doesn't get all dented and yucky looking. So now I'm going to use my pumpkin to cover up my other stamping. No one will know it's there, except for you and me, because we know I made a mistake, but no one else does. Okay, here's another mistake. So I don't realize I've got white pigment ink on that blender brush. I didn't grab the blending foam from the bottom of that fossilized amber. So I'm getting what's it called? Ink, white pigment ink on my pad. So I just went ahead and wiped it off on my paper. And then I grabbed the right foam. So, you know, usually pigment ink will sit on top of an ink pad. So if you make a mistake like that, you can usually just wipe it off to correct it. That's what those yellow smudges are on the paper underneath. So don't worry. And I also make mistakes too, like I always say. Crafting is, you know, one mistake after another, actually. And then sometimes they're happy mistakes and you like them and you leave it. But in this case, I didn't want white pigment ink on my leaf. So now I'm taking my evergreen bough from the Distress ink again, and I'm quickly using my little blending foam and I'm applying it to the edges of those leaves. So nothing too fancy, you know, just fast ink blending around the edges. Doesn't have to be exact. You do get your fingers get a little inky, so if that bothers you, you know, you might want to wear gloves or something, but, you know, it washes off, so I wasn't too concerned. So there we go. So now I think I have all my leaves inked. And now I'm going to pop up my pumpkin using 3M foam tape. That's kind of my go-to for larger things. And I will be using Simon Says Dimensionals for everything else. There we go. Popping up my little stem too. And so these are two really quick little cards. And I like that Jaded Blossom, a lot of times with their sentiments, have a Christmas sentiment and a fall type sentiment on a lot of their sentiment sets. You know, if you look, they have different seasons, you know, blended in there sometimes. And I love to use those because it's hard to come up with, you know, the number of cards that I send out for the fall and for Christmas if I just make them at fall and Christmas time. So I like to kind of make them ahead of time like I'm doing now. So I'm just trimming off the little stems so I can sort of pop these underneath the pumpkin. There we go. So super easy stuff, like I said before. I'm just making like a little nest of a few leaves, and I'll sprinkle a few more around just for some interest. And what I did is I cut all the leaves, all those miniature leaves out of the turquoise, and then I cut them again out of the yellow from that Knock on Wood pad. And then that way I have one of each, and I just sort of, you know, share them between the two cards. So I'm using my little Stampin' Up! Dimensionals here. to pop up these leaves, just to give them, like I said, a little dimension. I didn't ink blend. I could have ink blended around that scallop slider topper die, but you know, I don't think it really needs it because the background is plaid and it doesn't really blend into the background too much. So, but you know, if you were so inclined, you could use fossilized amber to ink around it. Did I say I used fossilized amber around the yellow leaves? I can't remember if I said mustard seed, but I meant fossilized amber. Sometimes my brain, I think of, you know, I think I'm saying one thing, but I say something else. So I meant fossilized amber and evergreen bough. Those are the colors that I used. So I used the fossilized amber around the scallop slider topper. There we go. So popping up those leaves, popping a few on the actual pumpkin itself, just for some interest. My voice is all gravelly today. It's really dry in my house, so you'll have to excuse that. I need to go get a drink of something. So here we are. So I'm just making sure I get all of my leaves on each of the cards. So fall in love with knitting. You know, you could use it with that knitted heart stamps, you know, stamp too. You could have it for a Valentine's Day card, but I was kind of playing on the word fall. So that's what I was going for here. Whereas you could probably use it, like I said, for Valentine's Day too. That would work. So now I am popping in these leaves. I'm actually using these leaves kind of like I used hearts a lot of the time. So I'm sure Michelle will be happy to see that I'm not using hearts again. There we go. So those are the two quick fall cards for you. I'm going to add Vintage Nouveau Drops in chocolate chip. I like these. Well, I love Nouveau Crystal Drops. The vintage ones aren't shiny, so that's kind of nice. And I was kind of going for like a dull brown to match the chocolate brown paper tray cardstock that I used. So that's about it. So thank you so much for stopping by. Be sure to hop on over to the Jaded Blossom blog and follow the hop. The design team has some amazing projects as always. And I hope to see you soon in the blogosphere and on YouTube. I'll be having a video for you again next Tuesday, I believe. So thanks everyone, and we will see you soon. Bye.